Hey, so hi. So, this particular video is about neither even nor odd with regards to quantifiability, right? If, for example, if you said that you could quantify each one of those notes that was produced in that music, it would require a great deal of disambiguation in order to say, well, we're going to quantify the number of notes, and then upon that determination, we're going to place whether or not there were an even number or an odd number, right? So it's okay anytime you have a numerical a number, you can state whether or not that number is even or odd generally. And almost, absolutely. I'm trying to think of what occasion you might argue that a certain number is neither either nor odd. But as far as the limits of in terms of diletheism, right? In terms of embedded contradiction, there are some instances when one is projecting a number or a number line onto the empirical world where disambiguation is not possible, or in other cases where it's only possible upon agreement, right? Meaning that you first must agree to certain things before you would state that the item is even or odd. Now, this has come up over the years in my mind as I've been working on expounding on diletheistic concepts, and so as and then this is traditionally brought up. I heard Sam Harris talk. I recently listened to a McRae and a Ozzy video, and this is just kind of passed off in philosophy as if it is the case, right? And what I mean by this is the argument is something like this: there's a number of hairs on my head, and that number is either even or odd, right? And then and so the first point is to talk about the difference between a state and something that's verbose, a verbose form, right? An entropic world. So, for example, you would say, well, okay, so begin counting demonstrates that there is an even or an odd number of hairs on my head, right? And that kind of, in one way, begs the question, because you're already stating, well, there's a number, and that number is either even or odd. But you're questing for whether it's even or whether it's odd, right? And so you begin counting, but by the time you finish counting, another hair has emerged, perhaps, or hairs have fallen out, and so they no longer are considered on my head, right? But then hairs might fall out from my follicles and still remain on my head. And then you have another problem at that point. And that this is kind of precisely one of the issues with quantification of even or odd when one is projecting a numerical system onto the world. Now, so we kind of say, like, okay, so a lawn, you say, oh, my lawn has even or an odd number of grass from it, right? But then you get the problem of this, right? Because you're talking about something that's entropic, you begin counting. And then you say, well, by the time I finished this, these new amounts of grass begin to appear, and these ones fell out and died, so we're not going to count those, right? And then the next problem comes down to this: you could still say, well, look, there's still an even or an odd number. You just at a state, like if you froze the lawn. And you took a photograph of it, then you can count the quantity of grass blades and say that is in fact an even or an odd number. But can you? Can you at that point, right? Meaning this, meaning at what point does a seed breaking open, let's say, a grass seed breaking open, at what point, or a hair follicle for that matter, at what point do you count a molecule in terms of a hair follicle, a molecule of something that is akin to hair on top of the gooiness, right? At what point do you call that hair, right? Now, at what point do you even call that molecule fuzz? And then are you going to count fuzz? Are you going to count something when it's fuzz? Or are you going to count it when it's a follicle? So the point that I'm driving at here is that disambiguation is the first process, right? And then you can come back in and say, well, providing we can disambiguate, we have an even or an odd number. But why I'm saying neither even nor odd, right, is because I'll suggest that disambiguation requires agreement, right? And agreement is found upon humans. Humans do this agreement, right? You can program a computer to analyze a data set and quantify it under certain parameters, but then you've already furthered what it is that you're referring to in the world, right? So let's go on with this. Okay, so that's the problem is without disambiguation, one must first start with agreement, right? So I go, okay, well, here I have a cup with some writing utensils. Now, these are probably, they're not going to fall apart in the entropic world very quickly. So I think under this particular time frame, we're pretty secure here, right? And now I'll say, okay, I have a cup full of writing utensils. And in this cup, are an even number of writing utensils or an odd number of writing utensils, right? And so then we get into this parity issue. Okay, what is this? Well, that appears to be a writing utensil. And sure enough, look, see that? I'm writing, right? And then you go, okay, so that's one, and there's two, and there's three, and anyway, and so forth, right? And then you just continue and you go, okay, so three, and let me put them back in there, and then you go okay. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and a wine opener. So 13 is an odd number, right? Okay. But so let's come down to this first. Now, first, what we're doing is we're analyzing utensils in the cup. Utensils in the cup, right? Writing utensils in the cup. So the first disambiguation, you argue, is do all of these qualify as in this cup, right? Like if I jump into a swimming pool, you can count the number of kids in a swimming pool, but it doesn't mean that they all have to have their heads underwater to be in the swimming pool, right? So you kind of do as a principle of charity, and I might say, well, look at these two. See these two? This one and this one, there's more of them that are outside of the cup than inside of the cup. So do I even say that they're in the cup? Like, do I count those two? Because if I don't count those two, then we got 11, right? Which is still odd, but we're debating on that. Okay, well, so now we have a problem of, do we agree that they're in the cup? Yes, there's more of them outside of the cup than there are in the cup, but then we're scrutinizing what it means to say in. We're disambiguating the sentence in the cup, right? And it becomes problematic. Okay, so then you carry on. Like, okay, so, well, and then you have to first garner agreement. First garner the agreement. Are you going to count that this way? Are, in fact, you going to say that in this cup, there are all of these, right? And so let's say that some of you say, well, no, those ones are more out of the cup than in the cup. And even though you might draw a circle on the ground and say, well, is he in the circle, right? Then you're referring to the language and kind of the acceptability of the language at this point. But this is exactly the point. These are humans that speak. Humans are doing these speak acts, and humans are agreeing, right? So quantification first requires disambiguation. And then the problem furthers itself. Okay, so let's take this one out, right? Now that one fell out. Just kind of like my idea of the hair. Oh, look. Hey, look, I'm writing. It's a writing utensil, right? It's not, and then, oh, what's this? Well, it's a pencil. It's not writing. It's a writing utensil, which is what we're arguing about, but it doesn't write. It doesn't write, right? The lead's broke. It's not writing. Now we have to argue now, what is a writing utensil? Well, it's a pencil, and we generally categorize a pencil as a writing utensil. But we have to disambiguate. If a writing utensil doesn't write, is it in fact a writing utensil? So now we have another disagreement. Now we can't quite come to whether or not we have an even number or an odd number in the cup, or what's in, or what's considered in the cup, right? And so that itself becomes problematic. Now we have a multi-dimensional or a multi-variant quandary here. And we can start counting how many of these quandaries there are, and then argue whether or not one of them is a quandary or not a quandary, and whether or not the number of quandaries is even or odd. Oh, well, look at this. Oh, here, I got this here wine opener, and oh man, now if I can indent into the paper, is it now considered a writing utensil? Is that considered a writing utensil? Because maybe there is some means that I would count this one a writing utensil, hence also making that one a writing utensil, simply because both of them dent. Both of them dent now paper. So now we might have to count this as part of this quantity, right? And so I could belabor this, right? I can belabor this problem and say, look, we can never disambiguate how many of these items are in fact qualifying for what it is we're referring to, right? Meaning we have 20 people, and if there's always someone in agreement, right? If there's always somebody in disagreement, then we have a problem, right? Such as this. Here's my coffee this morning. I say, hey, look in my cup. My cup is half full of coffee. Well, I didn't measure the ounces of this cup. You could argue, well, that looks like a little less than half. That looks like a little less than half. Why are you calling that a half cup? You've quantified a half, a 0.5 of your cup. We could measure this down to the end and finally realize, well, half of these 20 people say that this cup is half full, and the other half say it's not, and a few of them say it's good enough for the government, and some of them say, hey, it's good enough for the vernacular, and this really shouldn't even be a fucking issue. Right? Pardon my language. Anyway, point is at some point, then we might even argue, well, the cup I'm referring to, let me wazzle and dazzle you with my magic. The cup I was referring to was this cup, not this cup. So this cup is just coupled within, embedded within this cup. It's stacked. But I was talking about this cup, not that cup. Right now this one has 0 pencils in it, if we're not going to say that this cup is full of writing utensils. But some people go, well, obviously it is. Look at it. Hold that cup. This one holds that cup. Whole problem is when you're running into a problem with applying, like, numbers themselves, they have their own magic. They're contained within their own system, right? We utilize numbers as a tool to project upon the world. And generally, that tool is just accepted out of hand as always applying to anything. Like, how many stars are in the universe or in the galaxy? Oh, well, in the universe, we could say there's a finite amount, but we can never reach counting it or know it, so it's infinite. But we're really trying to figure out whether or not they're even or odd, number of stars, right? And so but the even or oddness is embedded within the numerical system. The disambiguation has something to do with the human's relationship to the vernacular referent. And generally, when one is referring to items in the universe, they're referring to entropic facts, entropic entities. Eventually, these will fall over, fall apart, not be considered what we identify as, such as we refer to Lincoln. Oh, Lincoln, blah, blah, blah. But what are we referring to when we reference Lincoln? Well, he's this carcass in the ground. He's some bones. He's a wreck. He's a mess. No, he's a president. No, he's a man. No, he's an abstract. No, he's... And anyway, so the point of me bringing this up in terms of diletheism, in terms of contradiction, is that before one is going to insist that there is in fact an even or an odd number of things that they're going to quantify, regardless of the circumstances, they must first agree upon the parameters, and then upon analysis, if new variants, such that I was going through here, appear, then there can be new scrutiny upon that. But at some point, one wants to lay the case to rest and just accept that this is in fact a half cup of coffee, that this one isn't a writing utensil, and maybe this one is, and that they're in the cup, and that the cup that they're in is that one, and then this is the number that we're going to talk about. Oh, okay, great. Well, but then, in the bottom of the cup, there just happens to be this piece of lead, and that lead, oh, look at that. Look how that lead right. Now we got a new problem. Now I don't know whether or not to call my finger a writing utensil, hence making it odd. Thanks for your time. 17 minutes. Point is, Western philosophy, human momentum, meaning the way humans approach philosophy, it's kind of with an insistence, like, hey, regardless of what you're saying, there's still an even or odd amount. And I'm saying, no, it's neither even nor odd, because you can't disambiguate to the point of agreement or enough's changed where you could never demonstrate it. And this notion that states, to say that the entropic world in all of its moving glory has a state, a frozen state, and that we can agree upon the facts of that state, that itself is a different sort of statement. Thanks for your time.